It all began with a dream. In 1972, when I lived in Myrtle Beach, Polly Branch told me of a dream she had the previous night. In the dream, Polly was in her parents' house in Chapel Hill. Her mother complained, "Those Baba people never do anything." "No, Polly countered. "What about that book on your coffee table, Watertight, Rosebud? It's about Anne Giles' college years." Today, Polly has no memory of this dream, but I tucked it away for future use. I thought it was a very intuitive title. Indeed, for all of my childhood and early adult years, I was a watertight rosebud, encased and unable to bloom. How the Indian spiritual figure, Avatar Meher Baba, answered my longing for love and opened me up is the theme of this memoir. It did not happen externally. I only knew about him from a distance, for a year and a half before he passed away. The connection was all internal, nourished from time to time by visiting places such as Mehrabad, India, where he is buried, and the Meher Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, his home in the West. In the beginning, Baba tipped his hand a bit to reassure me that he was really there. Later, my inner life was also helped by various therapists, and I was nearly 40 before one of them helped me identify the core problem and set me to work on it. And I'm going to continue on to chapter 2, which is Coming Back, 1945. All the chapters are the places where I was and the years where I was there. Pre-life fantasy. Whatever it was, I felt as if I'd come from something really awful. Coming back wasn't something I especially wanted to do. I just wanted to hide away until the bad time was over. "You have to go back," they told me. "But I don't want to." "You have to go back," they repeated. "All right, but I won't go back until that guy, Hitler, is gone." "No problem," they said. Bryn Mawr. I was born in the city of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, to Derek and Anne Giles on April 30th, 1945, at 7:31 wartime, which is year-round daylight savings, approximately 9 hours after Adolf Hitler killed himself in Berlin. Was it coincidental that I was born on that day? I always joked that Hitler killed himself because he knew I was coming. But perhaps it was the other way round. I was born because he had gone. Springtime for Hitler in Germany. All right, and I'm going to skip over some parts here. My childhood, which you can read about, to get a sense of how I was watertight. And where's my next little thing here? I heard about Baba from a Sufi in California in the summer of '67. And I was zapped. There wasn't any question. I'd waited my entire life for that moment. I knew it. But it wasn't him. So I kind of finally decided it must have been Meher Baba. And returning to my senior year at Smith College, I got a ride from a fellow who was driving a car back to the East Coast. He left me off at a Quaker meeting house near my grandmother's home in Schwenksville, Pennsylvania. And I had done a collage that showed the clock was 7 o'clock. I went inside. The grandfather clock on the opposite wall read exactly 7 o'clock. My collage had come true. On a whim, I opened the letter from Sufism Reoriented. I picked this letter up because at the house where I was staying, this girl had moved. "Your subscription to the family letters has expired," it said. "To continue receiving it, send $1 with your name and address to Sufism Reoriented, 1290 Sutter Street, San Francisco." That was how I remained connected to the Baba world through my last year at Smith and the remaining year and a half of Baba's life. After visiting my grandmother, I continued on to New York City, where my gay cousin Christopher was living with a fellow named Henry Geltzeller, the curator of 20th century art at the Metropolitan Museum. They were the first people I told about Baba. I found out later that David Hockney was a close friend of Henry's. From December 1968 to the end of January 1969, the last 2 years of Baba's life, months of Baba's life, Hockney created a portrait of Henry and Christopher sometimes humorously described as an Annunciation scene. David Hockney. Rotund Henry sits in the middle of a large sofa as the pregnant Virgin Mary, and Christopher stands sideways in a raincoat as the angel Gabriel. It had special meaning for me. Here I was, an Anne Giles, who brought them news about the latest incarnation of the Christ. And I'd always wanted to see this picture, and it came to the Metropolitan in New York, and my cousin lived in New York. So we went up and saw it, and we were able to get the picture of me and him in front of the picture. So I wasn't violating the ownership of the painting.
And who were you with in the photo?
My cousin David, his brother. And I'd known Christopher for years. I mean, I knew he was gay when I was a teenager. It was like way before that all started to happen. And another song we heard in the summer of 1967, Suzanne by Leonard Cohen, summed up my experience that year. It was a verse about Jesus as a traveler who touched your perfect body with his mind. After reading several of Leonard Cohen's poetry volumes, I was struck by his spiritual longing. It prompted me to send him a letter that went something like this. I could tell you about Hinduism, Buddhism, the Prophet Muhammad, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Aurobindo, Meher Baba, a bit of stealth marketing, and asked, but what I really think you need to do is pick just one thing and focus on it. So that summer, I got this letter from Greece, where he was living with his first girlfriend. And it says, Dear Anne, I agree with everything you wrote. Thank you. All good things, Leonard. So we know that he had heard Baba's name by that point.
Was that when he was on hiker?
It was in Greece, wherever it was he was there. Yeah. Because I was asking her to be. Now, here is the first example of something where Baba tips his hand. He tipped his hand. It's called Sage Hall, and there is a picture in the book of this particular auditorium at Smith College. It's not there now, but it was then. That winter, my roommate and I were in an auditorium at Sage Hall watching the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, directed by Mike Nichols. I had wanted to see it because the exterior shots were filmed at Smith, and their home in the film was Tyler Annex, just across from Sage Hall. After that, I had planned to go downtown to see another movie starring Alan Bates. At the start of the movie, George and Martha's marriage seems very similar to my parents'. Martha is dominant while George sits back passively. By the end of the film, their roles had reversed. George confronts Martha about their fantasy son and kills him off in front of their guests. At the end of the film, which is like from illusion into reality, at the end of the film, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor sit on a window seat. He sings, Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? And she responds, I am George. I am, with their hands clasped in front of the bay window. Then the focus shifts to the building beyond, Sage Hall, with the words, The End. The lights came on in Sage Hall, and I felt as if I had come out of the film into reality. I was so moved that I started crying. When we got outside, my roommate asked, Are you okay? Yes, I replied. I'm going to see the King of Hearts. And as I spoke those words, I felt as if I was speaking lines in a movie that had already been scripted for me. Alrighty. And what I want to say about these things is they may happen to a lot of people, but you've got to notice them. If they just go over your head, you missed it. So pay attention. You know, you never know when he's going to do stuff like this. Right, so it's this one right here. Now, I got the family letters, and I want to read this part of them. Baba had done this incredible piece of work in 1968, and he completed his work in June. And July 30th, Baba ended his universal work saying, and this is what I read in the family letters, "My work is done. It is completed 100% to my satisfaction. The result of this work will also be 100% and will manifest from the end of September." So Baba is saying that he will manifest from September 1968. And I graduated and looked for jobs, and the one I finally picked was the fun, easy one. Working, now Harvard University has not dorms but houses, and there's a master and a dean, the senior tutor. And I got a job with a fellow named Joel Porte, who was the youngest person at Harvard to ever receive full professorship. And his field was Emerson particularly. In September 1968, I reported for work at my new job at Quincy House, Harvard University. It paid me only $4,000 a year, but it was one of the best jobs I ever had. For Joel Porte, I handled grades and typed letters of recommendation for Harvard seniors applying to graduate school. And I found in my files that Rick Chapman had been a freshman there. Amazing. I also had free meals, access to the Quincy House darkroom, and a pal in Susie, the secretary to Charles Dunn, the master of Quincy House. A Scotsman, he would play the bagpipes on roofs on special occasions. We would arrange and attend his parties. Guys would come down and visit Susie and me for tea, looking for female companionship in the years before the house went co-ed. In addition to handling administrative functions, Joel would have weekly tutorials with various students in his office. One day in September 1968, a serious guy with glasses named Andy Lesnick came in for his tutorial. He noticed the Baba card under my blotter. "Who's that?" he asked. "That's Mayor Baba," I answered, giving it to him. "He says he's God." Andy held it thoughtfully and then handed it back to me. During subsequent sessions, he would see the Baba photos that I was allowed to hang on my walls around my desk. We would sit and talk about Baba before he went in to talk to Joel about American Transcendentalism. And I'm not quite sure what you were studying. Do you remember? What were you going in for your tutorial?
We were working on
Hawthorne and Melville. And another thing that happened in September 1968 was going to my first Baba meeting at Jim McGrew's house. He showed us Baba films loaned to him by Sufism Reoriented. Later, he hosted and showed Baba's films at other public venues such as schools, libraries, and community centers. This was the first time I ever saw Meher Baba in action. Jim also passed around his lock of Meher Baba's hair. While I held it, I noticed a bubble of stillness surrounding me. Later, I came to realize that this was probably Meher Baba's presence. And let's see what this one is. I won't go back and talk about Darshan because it's in the empty chair and you can read my account of it here. But I did get quoted in the New Yorker magazine because during Darshan, Fred Winterfeld stood up and said, "Baba, my heart is so full, my mouth is overflowing." And I heard this inner voice that said, "Ha! When the heart is full, the mouth is shut." And I remembered it. So when James Ivory was talking to Dee Dee and Julian Mavris, and Dee Dee was trying to express what Baba's presence felt like, I volunteered the phrase I had heard inwardly, "When the heart is full, the mouth is shut." He wrote it down, and later, when I read his story in the June 21st, 1969 issue, I found he had spelled my name wrong. But I had my 15 minutes of fame in the New Yorker magazine.
Talk of the town. The album was in the Talk of the Town section?
Yeah, it was.
Now, you talked about James Ivory, the same.
Ken Lux decided or found out that that's who it was that wrote the article. And this is James Ivory of the film,
That's what I was.
Merchant Ivory Films.
So,
But he wrote for the Talk of the Town back, probably, he must have just met his partner because he was collecting at the airport Indian art that had come through on the airplane. We were at Air India.
so that's where he was talking to people that were coming over.
He interviewed us beforehand and he got Darwin Shaw and Charles Haynes to tell him who Baba was. And then he agreed to meet us when we came back. So that was nice. And let's see what's going on over here. All right, now this is another one of those tip your hand things. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
All right. This is called Butch Cassidy. Another movie that impressed me was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It was filmed in 1968 and came to a theater in Harvard Square in the fall of 1969. It had another of Baba's messages for me. This is another illusion reality thing. The film begins with an old-time CBS sequence showing outlaws running from the law. Then the film turns into color and you are right there with Butch and Sundance as they hide out with their friend Etta, the local schoolteacher. Butch and Sundance are called the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, and they have a lucrative career robbing banks. But eventually one of the lawmen vows to capture them. At this point, they talk to Etta about their plans to get out of town and travel to Bolivia. She responds, "I'm 26 and I'm single and a schoolteacher, and that's the bottom of the pit. And the only excitement I've known is with you here now. So I'll go with you, and I won't whine. I'll sew your socks, and I'll stitch you up when you're wounded. I'll do anything you ask of me, but, except one thing, I won't watch you die. I'll miss that scene if you don't mind." So they travel to Bolivia, and their outlaw career begins again. While they were robbing banks, the swingle singers are singing, "Ba ba 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 ba." Things get dangerous, and Etta eventually leaves. Butch and Sundance are finally holed up in a building surrounded by Bolivian soldiers and an American posse. They joke with each other as they rush the posse and are killed in a burst of gunfire. Then the color film dissolves back into sepia for the titles, reinforcing the message that it was just a film, just an illusion. As I watched the end, I had a minor epiphany. I always felt badly that I wasn't very brave or heroic. But now I realize that I didn't have to be the hero. I could just be the woman. I came out of the film and crossed Mass Ave to the bus stop by the entrance to Harvard Yard. All of a sudden, a man turned the corner and stopped right in front of me. You ready? "That's a nice dress you're wearing," he commented. I was wearing sort of a peasant dress with a calico skirt. All the time he was speaking to me, inwardly I was going, "Baba, Baba, Baba," because the man had so immediately reinforced my realization. Baba was sending the message, "Yes, you've got it."
She's a woman.
She's a woman. And then the man went on into Harvard Yard. I had the feeling if I had gone after him, he wouldn't be there anymore. I saw the movie again in Myrtle Beach when I was teaching school there. A group of us were seeing it together at a local theater. When Etta Place utters the line, "I'm 26 and I'm single and a schoolteacher and that's the bottom of the pit," Marshall Hay laughed and pointed at me. The odd thing was, it was 1971 and I was 26, single and a schoolteacher. The rest I won't comment on. He gave me some good jokes, I gotta say. Now, I'm going to read a little bit about the center. And this is called Elizabeth in Charge. The center closed for the first time in November 1970 for repairs and renovations. Winnie Barrett and I were living together in North Myrtle Beach. And one night we threw a party. A carefully painted our VW bus pulled up at our house and 4 people got out. Andy Lesnick, his friend Malcolm Clay, Malcolm's wife Barbara, and Malcolm's sister Mary Clay. They said they wanted to see the center. We told them unfortunately it was closed for repairs, but we went over to Kitty and Elizabeth's house to see what could be arranged. Not only did they get to see the center, Elizabeth put them to work helping with the renovations. Elizabeth was usually in the background of the center, but there was no question that she was in charge. One night at the weekly discourse meeting, the group got into a heated discussion about Baba's discourse on sex. Someone in the group advanced the view that you couldn't always believe what was in the discourses because the Sufis had edited and changed them. Sufism Reoriented published the current version in 1967. One of the women in the group was a Sufi who lived in Myrtle Beach. She worked for the press. I found the talk disturbing, but I found the talk afterwards in the original kitchen even more disturbing. "Isn't it great how Baba works?" one fellow said, "stirring things up like this." Suddenly the door opened and Elizabeth walked in. She sat down in one of the armchairs. "I always knew Baba was the awakener," she told us, "but I didn't expect to be awakened tonight at 9 o'clock by a call about your discourse meeting." "Let me assure you," she said, "that everything in the discourses was dictated by Meher Baba. You see, I was there. He dictated one discourse for each issue of the Meher Baba journal." She said the content had not changed in any substantive way in the subsequent editions. With that, the fog cleared, and I felt instantly reassured that no schism was about to start. Now, another incident illustrated Elizabeth's way of always being on top of things. I had read some of Baba's discourses to Bob Holt, a blind friend in Cambridge, the fellow who eventually wrote The Ocean of Love in 1979 after touching the shells spelling out this phrase on the beach path. Bob was coming to the center and I agreed to help him find his way around. We were down at the boathouse and Bob had the idea that he wanted to climb on the roof. I thought the idea highly dangerous, and I seemed powerless to stop him. He actually grabbed hold of some of the boards and got himself up there. I cried plaintively, "Bob, please come down." And wouldn't you know, just about then Elizabeth's car drove up. She got out and came down to see what was going on. By that time, Bob had lowered himself almost to the ground. I was so glad to see her. She was on top of the situation, and Bob thankfully was not. All right, now, this is a chapter involving Muhammad Must. And I went to India in 1972, and I paid a visit in Mandalay Hall in Lower Mehrabad, where Muhammad the Must was then staying. Muhammad said something in Marathi, and I want to get you to show this dress. He wants to look at your rose robe. And it is kind of rose, isn't it? So I spread my arms apart and let him look at it. Padre explained that I was now Muhammad's prisoner. He wanted to concentrate on my dress. I had to stand there, arms wide open, until he let me go. Apparently this was something Muhammad had been doing with other visitors from time to time. At the time I was wearing a deep pink dress I had made myself the summer before. I thought it may have contained my conflict about Sufism, because I didn't decide for sure what was going on. But Muhammad may have seen it differently. Maybe it was my watertight rosebud robe he was seeing. And he seemed to be talking a blue streak. "Oh, she's crying. She's really crying now." And I thought he was joking about my being a prisoner. And finally he said, "Ciao," and I shot out of the hall.
Which means go.
Go, yeah, get the hell out of here, kind of. All right, wait a minute. And this is another Elizabeth story. At SRA, they had a women's studies kit, and they wanted to call it Her Story, but they didn't like the title very much. So I submitted the obvious choice, which was Our Story, and it was selected, and I got a $75 Dinner for Two award. After this, I was staying at the guest house at Meher Center with some other women. We had the idea of inviting Kitty and Elizabeth out for dinner with the award and then paying any amount that was left. We assembled at the Hilton Hotel dining room. It only seemed fitting that the award should go to these two Western women who were definitely our story. Right. Now, just as a preface to the year 1989, I was in India, and Mara had a diary. And I don't believe I brought it with me, but anyway, it looked like this, and she wanted to know who wrote, and so she ended up giving it to me, and I took it to mean that 1989 was Mara's year. It was a diary book that you could fill in. Or probably it had dates, and you could fill your appointments in. And I'm going to continue with Muhammad, because this is the theme of this particular section. Around this time, I finally heard from a Sufi friend whom I'd met in India. I have some new skills, he told me. Do you want me to heal your pancreas? I can do it. No, my response was immediate, but I thought he probably could do it. I remember Dr. Kenmore had told me that he could cure his own cancer, but only at the cost of losing his connection to Baba. So I wasn't going there. The physical organ could be healed, but the mental impressions that caused the illness would probably pop up in some other way that I wouldn't be easily able to manage. Dun Sata at Akar Press had MS, but was also told by Baba that he could heal her, but she would just have to go through it all again. Why are you so attached to it, my friend said. He then explained that a friend of his offered another type of inner healing that transmitted a wellogram of wholeness into your mental body. And I'm not going to read all of this, but you had to do these unjamming exercises. And so I got this, I lay down on the thing and he treated me from a distance, and I did these unjamming exercises, but right after the Darshan reunion in 1989, I had a very heavy pain in my abdomen, and Deb Smith was at the house, and she took care of me, took me to the emergency room, and I lay there on the examination table, moaning, crying, really crying now. Remember what Muhammad said. And they decided that I had a blockage in my intestinal tract, and they put me in surgery, cut 12 inches out, stitched it back together, and it was called intussusception. You have to either be a horse or a child or a baby, but being, 40 years old and having this happen to you is very unusual. Obviously, something about this wellness healing had caused it. Okay, so I returned home on May 19th, 1989. I remember lying in my bed trying to sleep, and I flashed on a sensation of lying on a cold surface with my belly hot, which could have been remembering a surgery unconsciously or whatever. The next day was May 20th. At 9:45 a.m. India time, near midnight the night before, Mera passed away to Baba. Was my surgery a coincidence? I never knew. But then and there I thought to myself, let this surgery be the cutting out of all my past connection with the occult. Cut it out and throw it away. And I was able to return to India in September 1989, when Bao was taking people to visit Muhammad. This time, people were bringing him chocolates. You don't need to pass this around, but I brought him Snickers candy. I gave them to his hands, and then Muhammad gave them back to me. And then Muhammad gave us all his blessing, and of course, I had to eat those chocolates right away. Later, I heard Roy Hayes' story of being handed some of Muhammad's stools in 1986, wrapped in a piece of paper. Roy was going to throw them out, but Muhammad insisted he keep them, and himself put them in the pocket of Roy's jeans. On the day of his bath, Roy took the jeans off, smelled the pocket, and discovered it was filled with some prasad and pieces of chocolate candy. Roy had been given shit that turned into chocolate. I had been chocolate that went down and touched all those tubes that had been injured and turned into shit. And the title of this section is Turds and Why. Like curds and whey, turds and why. What a fellow that Muhammad was. So this is just a lovely section of Mera's birthday at the end of that year. So the year ended with this lovely, happy ending. Mera's year ended with a trip to Mayor Center, arriving on his birthday. Snow started falling as we reached Conway. I told Phil Smith, my traveling companion, that I wanted it to snow a lot, but not for it to get heavy until we got there. My wish was granted. By the time we reached the center gates, the snow had blanketed the road with light powder and was starting to stick to the windshield. As we checked in, Jane Brown reminded us that it was Mera's birthday, the first since her passing. I would be staying in the guest house where Mera stayed long ago. And we took these wonderful pictures. This is the guest house gate with snow on it. When I arrived there, the compound was covered by a pure carpet of newly fallen snow. All was silent except my footsteps as I unloaded my things. After parking my car, I walked back along the path. The snow was coming faster now. Around me the silent forest kept out all but the faintest whisper of wind, and its trees rapidly becoming outlined in fanciful dollops of this perfect, impeccable snow, just like Mara. Against the dark and starry night, this cozy little house in the woods looked like a three-dimensional Christmas card sent by Baba and Mara. Added to this picture of Mara's birthday was a pure swan that had sheltered on the lake. Fortunately, Phil and I had brought food from home. Going out to shop seemed impossible. That night, we hoped that dear Father Christmas would find his way down the King's Highway in his sleigh to deliver the presents of his presents to good little girls and boys. And I don't need that. I don't need that. Now, I don't go into this in length, but I sent Ivy Deuce, a copy of a book called, little cartoon called Wake Up God, which was my attempt to show what God Speaks was in cartoon form for kids. And she liked it, but she said that, or I gave her another version, and she said that the kids wouldn't understand the planes and you shouldn't try to tell them about that. So I sent her another version, and she said you just need to decide whether you're doing teenagers or kids. So, this is a dream, and the section is called Green Peas. Muhammad the Musk popped up again in another dream. One night I dreamt I was in India with him and several children whom I brought to his feet. We were following him around on a walk when Muhammad showed me a drawing and gave me this order: collect some green peas and put them around the border. Okay, I thought, I can do that. I found some green peas and started to line them up when I woke up. While I stood in the mirror remarking to Baba about the unusual nature of my dream, I saw the t-shirt I had worn to bed. You do have to show this one. It was the Sidetrek t-shirt I had worn to bed. I had bought it at the museum in Atlanta, and it was called The Solar System Made Easy. It depicted the relative size of the planets in our solar systems as vegetables. Saturn was a squash, Jupiter was a cauliflower, Uranus and Neptune were tomatoes, and Earth and Venus were radishes, and all around them was a rectangular box of peas. Square of peas. The shirt explained the solar system in a way that was easy for people to visualize. I marveled at Muhammad's telling appearance in my dreams. I came to feel that this was his way of encouraging me to try to tell the story of God Speaks for children and a general audience. And I hope to do that someday. All right, I'm almost done. I'm going to go towards the back here. Oh, you're not? Okay. As I mentioned in the book earlier, we were able to scan and reprint memoir in last summer at a reasonable cost. The book was released in July 2017, and at that time, I signed an agreement leaving all revenues from my Baba book projects to Share Air Foundation. I paid for the printing. It was a donation. And these books generate revenue for Share Air Foundation, and they then generate books, Baba books. So I encourage people to buy them. It's not like me, but it'd be nice to have more, capital to be able to do Baba books. During my many days at IBM, especially being bored on my commute, I drew a small cartoon called My Day with Meher Baba. He drove me there in the car, he attended our department meetings, we went out to lunch together, and so on. It helped me practice the presence of God and lifted my days up a bit. Then I realized what a great children's book it would make, simple and easy to read. I sketched out a 12-page story and looked for an illustrator, and it took me about a year and a half. And I was at this bookstore, over on the wall, and I saw this card drawn by Amy Steele. And I said, bingo. And I wrote her, and she was willing to do the illustrations for free. And it was just perfect. And so we started working together on this book, which came out in 2018. All right, that's just a little bit of a note. All right. Let's see what this is. It's called Reflection. So I'm going to look at summing up how I feel about my life and everything. This book tells how Meher Baba answered my longing for love and changed my life. As I mentioned earlier, I now look back on these years with amazement. I was amazed that so much interchange could occur through Meher Baba's invisible help, that I now feel full with a sense of self still expanding. In my astrological, no, you don't want to know about that. Okay. And when I look back at the more than 70 years of my life, I'm struck by how much that seemed random to me, such as my jobs at SRA and IBM, were actually critical for the Baba work I did later. I always quipped that they paid me good money to learn new and useful skills. Even though this book is about how Meher Baba opened me up to him, it's also a bit about the social history of those of us in the first generation after his passing. I mean, if you think that from September 1968 to now, 50 years, all that has happened, his manifestation is slowly growing, and here we all are. All right, that's all right. I now see that part of Baba's seclusion work that manifested from the end of '68 must have been weaving the cloth that drew us all together, we who recognized him internally this time. In 1969, I barely knew those on our flight to India. Over time, many of them became close friends. Over the 50 years, I've gotten to watch the story develop, the growth of Meher's Center and other retreat spaces at Ojai, California, Meherana, Prague, Oklahoma, the founding of Sharia Press and other publishers of Meher Baba books, yearly Baba gatherings across the country, audio and video recordings of Meher Baba's mandali and close ones, and the work of many artists and musicians expressing their love for him. And there are many more chapters to come in his story. And I'm going to shift over here. I have several copies of this, which you're welcome to pick. And if you can't pick them because they've gone to too many people, you can write your name and address down if you would like to get a copy of this green card. This was done a year ago when a certain political figure was blocking people with legitimate green cards. And I said to myself, no, that's not the green card we need. We need a universal green card, permanent residence within the orb of my love. And I got Baba to sign it.
And I showed it to the English language students.
Oh, cool. And Baba's title is Director, Department of Immigration, United States of Consciousness. So, once you know about who he is, how do you draw closer to him? Learn as much about him as you can, what he was like, what he liked, read books by or about him, see him in action in films, and so forth. Think all of this is packing your suitcase, as Monty would say. The impressions of him that you store now will remain with you into the future. The discourses are a good source of advice. Pay attention to him more and more and to ourselves less and less. One good way to do this is to assign your actions to your provisional ego, which is why I said Baba really basically wrote this book, giving him the credit, not me. So you could say that Baba is my real self. I'm just dreaming or acting a character named Anne Giles. Meher Baba is the real author of this book and my life with all its errors and successes. And I had foot surgery and I had to move into another bedroom. And I moved my Baba paintings, this is a large linot, into my bedroom. The wall facing my bed was empty, so I moved it there. As I lay in bed, I felt as though he was there all the time, looking at me. I bought a small Irani prayer rug and would say the prayers there in front of the painting. When I had a problem, I stood there and called it to his attention. And when I had lost something, I told him. And when I found it, I thanked him. Sometimes, just sitting on my bed, I would feel a whiff of his presence. Some people have their altars. I have my Skype screen. It's your way of talking to people in India? Well, this is my Skype screen. And this is how the book ends. Oh, Baba, eventually my petals will fall off in old age, and rose hips will form for my next incarnation. I think I'm probably in that petals dropping off stage. But I will have bloomed. Baba, you will have bloomed in me. As Meher Baba himself said, the drama of the continued life of the individual soul, has many acts. The actors disappear from the stage of earth only to reappear again in new capacities and new contexts. Unconscious of the closely guarded truth that the author of the drama, in his imaginative production, himself became all the actors and played the game of hide and seek in order to come into full and conscious possession of his own creative infinity. The author has to play the parts of all the actors, to know himself as the author of this great detective story, worked out through the cycles of creation. And I also want to mention that if you know Alfred Hitchcock, you know that he's in his films. And because you know who he is, you can look for him and recognize him in his films. But if you don't know who he is, he's just a bit character in the background. So, know who he is, and you'll find him the next time he's in the film.